The number one thing you want to think about when you're building a portfolio for travel and landscape photography is, of course, the locations that you choose to add to your portfolio. So there's a couple things that you really have to factor into it. A lot of people ask me, how do I build an amazing portfolio of travel and landscape photography? And the number one answer I can give you is you have to fill it with only your best work. And what I always try to tell people is, if you look at my portfolio, there may only be 50 or 60 images in that section. And I've been shooting for many years, but those 50 or 60 images out of the hundreds, or not thousands, that I've shot are my favorite ones. So your portfolio essentially becomes your outward face to anybody who's trying to find you. You know, whether that's something you're showing on your iPad when you're in with clients, you're in with potential people that you want to work with, or that's on your SmugMug website or your WordPress website where you host all of your work. Faced with the challenge of building a really comprehensive travel and landscape photography portfolio, I knew that where I lived in Central Florida wasn't going to cut it. It's very flat, there's a few beachy kind of scenes, but I really wanted mountains, I wanted ancient villages, I wanted UNESCO World Heritage Sites, so I picked to concentrate most of my portfolio on old European cities. But for landscape photography, you don't just have to go to places like Iceland and New Zealand. If you live in the United States, you can pretty comfortably travel within your own country. If you live in Central Florida, you may have to fly or else drive many hours, but if you already live out west, if you live in California, Utah, Colorado, Arizona, any of the places where there's natural beauty, in the West, there are so many great mountain chains and so many iconic places that are so famous all over the world. You can easily travel and take a road trip around the United States or parts of Canada to start building your landscape photography portfolio. Once you do that, you can actually keep your costs down inside of your own country. Then you can start going to some of the more exotic places. But bear in mind, exotic just means exotic to you. Somebody who lives in Iceland doesn't necessarily consider Iceland to be exotic. They may actually travel to where you live in Colorado and think it's way more exotic than their own country. Same thing with Australia and New Zealand. It's all just a matter of perspective. So one of the biggest challenges with photography is getting out and exploring what's actually around you and realizing that you're probably next to some very extraordinary and beautiful things. So if you are next to those things within proximity and you can get to them, I suggest exploring your own regions first to help you develop the base of your portfolio. When you're just starting out, the other benefit of exploring what's closest to you and what's easiest to get to is it gives you a chance to get right out there and develop your own style. So when you start out in landscape photography, you might think that you want to just capture these beautiful landscapes. But up until that point, you may not have done much of that type of photography. So as you start to take these photos, post-process these photos, you're going to start to fall into what's called your own individual style. And once that starts to happen, you'll start to figure out what you're naturally gravitating towards. So you might get out there and you might love waterfalls, you might love mountains, you might love the reflected mountains in rivers and ponds. You just might like certain atmospheres over other atmospheres, and that's going to lead you to start to determine where you want to go to help build your portfolio. But bear in mind, the best portfolios are diversified portfolios. So you not only want to have these beautiful photos, but you want to have a variety of different types of beautiful photos. So it shows that you can do more than just take photos of waterfalls, more than just take photos of mountains, more than just take photos of UNESCO World Heritage Sites. It basically shows that you can do everything inside of the genre. But what will unify all of those photos together is when you start to develop your own look. The best case scenario after years of work, putting the time in to build your portfolio, is for somebody to look at your images and distinctly know that they're your images. One of the best things you can do is to practice close to home, practice on a budget, practice somewhere that you can repeat. So when you first visit a location, you may get some okay shots, but you're not really familiar with it. The more you visit a location, the more familiar you become, and the more comfortable you come with the changing environment that you're in. By spending time in locations, it gives you the ability to practice, and it also gives you the ability to come away with something you may not have seen the first time. So if you invest a lot of money right off the bat and travel to these crazy far locations and exhaust a huge budget, you may come back with some okay photos. But if you practice before you go, you have a better chance of making the best use out of that time and money spent in those different far-off locations. Once you start to feel comfortable with your surroundings and your style, and you just really start to feel like you know the types of photos that you want to capture, then it's time to travel outside of your comfort zone, outside of your surrounding area, outside of the areas that are easy for you to get to. And that's going to take a little bit of research. And what I usually do, and years ago it was different, now it's getting so much easier. The Flickr search engine still isn't that great, to be honest, but 500px is really great. Just Google searches are great. So if you start Googling the places that you want to visit, you're going to see hundreds of different photos come up. Now granted, if you do a Google search, most of those photos aren't going to be very good. But what you have to do is you have to recognize the potential of visiting an area. So each area for landscape photography will have sort of known and unknown areas. And when you know that an area is well known is when you see a dozen of the same photo come up on Google. And if you see 150 of the same photo come up on Google, then you probably know that it's even a standard viewing point. There's probably like a hot dog stand and a viewing deck and somebody who can take your photo. But for a lot of the stuff that you'll see on Google, you're just going to see daytime shots. But what you're going to get a feel of is what the mountains look like, what the environment looks like, what the little towns look like, and that can kind of base the idea of what you can go. Because the best thing that you can do in these places is to not just copy the photos that you see, but it's to get your own versions of these photos, and that takes a little bit of vision. So if you practice at home, you know your own mountain ranges, you know your own environments, then you have a better idea of how the light's going to change in these different environments, how the environment's going to change with the weather, and how that's going to play a role on the photography. And when you start doing the research on these other places that you go to, that's going to be your inspiration to feel whether or not these places have potential. So when I research a new place, something I may have heard of, someplace somebody might have told me about, I'll recognize not necessarily if there's a final photo, like that's the photo that I want to capture. That's not what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is the potential to create something new, something memorable. And that's where your eye will start to tell you if that's even possible and if these places are going to be on your list. And the other thing that's really nice is once you start becoming comfortable with the different types of landscapes, if you go to similar types of landscapes with similar types of conditions, then you're going to achieve a lot while you're there. When you talk about a portfolio of work as a whole body of work, if you will, and you think of a landscape photography portfolio, in my opinion, it should be a good blend of partial sets of very iconic locations, Horseshoe Bend, the Grand Canyon, different places in Iceland and New Zealand that people know. Because these are areas that people have visited and it has done something and will either inspire the feeling or a memory of them being there, or it could inspire desire for them to want to go there. But your portfolio shouldn't just be the big iconic shots, it should also be things that you've discovered, unknown areas, or different takes on those same places that create different vantage point and different intrigue. So in one sense, it's nice to have some iconic elements, but in the other sense, it's nice to have something new. So anytime you can establish a location as your own, then that's a really great thing because you have something unique. And that creates another big challenge. So if you start working in these really iconic places, you're going to see photos, great photos of these places, and then it's going to be up to you to figure out what you can do different. How does your style play differently in this place than the hundreds, if not thousands, of other photos that you've seen? And how can you make something that's visually different that stands out from the rest? Once you start doing this kind of work for a while, you'll start to naturally gravitate towards what you prefer to do the most. So you might do this for a while and you might say, hey, I really love long exposure, black and white, traditional fine art stuff. And then you might seek out the best places to get that look. But the more you start building your portfolio over months or years sometimes, you're going to naturally start to have your own style. You're going to start to notice that you naturally start to do these certain types of things to your images. And then after a while, you're going to notice that you start to hone in on this, because you start to develop your own style and your own technique, and that'll start to dictate what your portfolio will become and which genre you're going to find yourself really starting to fit into. In the beginning, when you're seeking your own style, we're obviously studying the photos around us. A great thing to do is shoot with people that you admire, and it's an amazing thing that you can stand next to 2 or 3 other photographers in the same location, and everybody will come away with something completely different. So that varies in the different compositions, the different way that they see or interpret the scene, and then also that goes into the post-processing element, and whether somebody likes, as I said, the black and white images, or they like the high color images, or like me, they like the blue hour, the harmonizing of all the colors together. Everybody's going to come up with something very unique, and that can be really inspiring. And it's nice to be able to pick out people's work, my colleagues, in different websites, 500px or different social media sites, not even look at who posted, just see the image and I'll know exactly, that's this person's work or this person's work, because their work has started to sort of stand out as this particular style. Above all, my greatest advice to you when you're building your portfolio is to focus on quality over quantity. That was something that I did in the beginning, and it was tough because all of my peers, they'd go somewhere like Monument Valley or Iceland and they'd release 100 images. But the thing was, out of those 100 images, only 3 or 4 were really solid wow factor images that really belonged in their portfolio. So out of the dozens and hundreds of images that I was capturing, I decided to only release the ones that I liked the most. And sometimes that was only 1 or 2. Sometimes I had 5 or 6. But it's very important in your portfolio to not overdo it. If you shoot the same waterfall in Iceland 6 different ways, you have to choose one of those photos to represent that waterfall for Iceland in your portfolio. You can't have 3 or 4 unless they look like different places, because that basically just creates redundancy inside of your portfolio. So they have to be your favorite shots, but you also have to really be selective to make sure that you're not over-representing a certain location and causing people to feel like your portfolio is repetitive. It can be sort of heartbreaking sometimes over the years when you're sort of trimming off those levels of your portfolio, because you might revisit locations. I revisit locations all the time, and I'll get a better version of a single shot. Like if I go to one place 2 years later, I'll get a better version, better light, better composition, better understanding of location. And that's an easy one. I can kind of cut out the old one and leave the new one in there now. But sometimes if your portfolio starts to get a little too big, you'll look back years before and you'll see images that you may love, but they probably don't belong in your portfolio anymore. And in that sense, you have to figure out how much new work to add and how much old work to remove. I get a lot of questions about how many images makes up a strong portfolio. But the answer to that question is a strong portfolio is only made up of strong images. So I'd rather see 10 or 15 of the most awesome images I've ever seen than 100 that are just mediocre. Because if I see another mediocre portfolio, I'm just going to pass it up. But my eyes are going to lock in on quality photos. And whether that's 10 or 20, I don't think it's a big deal as long as they're high quality. In many ways, having one weak image in your portfolio can bring down your whole body of work, because people will go through your portfolio, but they'll notice that you also have some bad images too. So they're not just looking at your work and the quality of work, they're also looking at the quality you have to determine what should and should not be in your portfolio. So there's a term in photography that's used sometimes when you see an amazing photo that somebody's taken. You click on this photo, it's the most amazing photo you've ever seen. You go to their portfolio and it's filled with a bunch of photos that don't even make sense, almost like it's a completely different photographer. What that tells people, and that tells me, even if it's subconsciously, is that this photographer just got lucky that one time. Or if I see a great photo, bad photos, and a great photo, that means that they may have gotten lucky twice. But if I see 6 amazing photos, to me that shows consistency. So your portfolio isn't just about quality, it's about quality and consistency. To sort of wrap this up about building your portfolio, the best thing you're going to be able to do is just to have experience doing it. You're going to have to look at those images. You're going to have to make the hard decisions of which ones you want to cut out. Sometimes it's heartbreaking. You can use them for other things, maybe just not the face of your portfolio. Another great thing you can do is have your friends, people you trust, review it. Have people just look at it. Sometimes people who have nothing to do with the photography industry. Don't show a fashion photographer your landscape images. Show landscape photographers. But then show somebody who doesn't even do photography. Show your mom, show your brother, see what they think. Try to find out if people are having a certain emotional reaction to an image, whether that's the color, whether that's the texture, or the location. If you're getting a feeling from somebody, if you see somebody watch your photos or view your photos and actually have some sort of emotion, then you're on the right track. If you ask them, and this is the toughest thing you're gonna find, you may have your favorites, but when you start showing your portfolio to your peers, to your prospective clients, or even friends and family, you may love a photo, but everybody else says, I just don't get it. And that's when you really have to make that hard choice. Is it that I love that photo, or is it that it's actually good? And sometimes those are two different things. So don't be discouraged in the beginning. You are going to make some mistakes, but just really concentrate on finding the ones that really lead the pile of work that you've achieved in these locations and focusing on there. And this is also not something that you have to get right at first, because a portfolio is something that's a constant work in progress. The years that I've been shooting, I am constantly adding new work, removing other work, and getting that portfolio to be a consolidated and concise, small body of work that I'm proud of. So now that you've started to build this incredible portfolio of images, what's next? How do you get both your name and your images out there? For me, the answer to that question was web and social media. So I initially started a blog called blamethemonkey.com where I was able to post the photos that I was getting, the photos that went into my portfolio, and also have a story to go along with them. So I like to combine words and imagery to try to captivate people with the visual element and the story element. And that was the beginning of sort of how I developed what I was going to be sharing on social media. Another big key to what I do is I share a lot of stuff on different social media sites. That's Facebook, Google+, Twitter, and Instagram. But I also work with 500px and Flickr. And they're not exactly social media sites, they're more communities that you can share your photography on and get feedback and inspiration from other photographers. But number one, really, the first thing you're going to have to do is, whether you set up a blog or your own photography website, you're going to have to host your portfolio somewhere. And you're going to have to create a nice looking, very professional looking website that people can find your work. My portfolio is hosted on a SmugMug website, and that's EL-PTWCAAPP-L12. That's basically what I consider to be my face to anybody who's looking for my images. And when I upload my images, they're all keyworded, named, and they have descriptions so that I know when people search images on Google or Yahoo, I'm hoping that with those descriptions and those keywords, they become very index friendly. In other words, the search engines index those keywords, and when people do image searches, my hope is that they come up. But either way, anytime somebody's vetting me or I'm trying to approach a company or a client, I can send them a link to my website, and I know that they'll see the website, they'll like the way it looks, and they'll instantly be able to go in, click on my portfolio, click on my bio, click on my past experience, and see if I'm somebody that they want to work with. From here on out, it's important, whether it's a website or social media, to understand that whether you are branding just your name as a photography business, so, you know, blah blah photography, or you have a name for your company that's something completely different. Whether it's just your name with photography, or this name of a company, they all become a brand. So as soon as you put your work out there, your name or your company's name now becomes a brand. So it's important to be professional and consistent with whatever you post. So just as we talked about in the portfolio section of building your best body of work, this has to be your best face forward. So you want to concentrate on the web design. If you don't know how to design a website, you can hire somebody to create a website. There's plenty of templates. If you start a SmugMug account, you can actually create a template and you can build right from there. SmugMug's really easy. It links right to your Adobe Lightroom catalog. You can upload directly from there or through their interface, and you can very quickly create a dynamic portfolio of images. The other thing with your online portfolio that's good is keep it fresh and keep it updated. So if you shot a lot for 6 months, you have a lot of new work, you have a lot of new projects, things to write about, then make sure you're constantly updating your page to reflect your most current projects that you're proud of. A big key to how I got my name out there early was getting involved in social media from the beginning. So I was one of the early adopters to Google+, and soon after I started using Facebook and Instagram. When Google+ first came out, it gave us the ability to share images right to the Google platform. And the nice thing is, whatever I title the photo, the descriptions, and the keywords all become metadata for the search engines. So now all of the work and the years that I've spent on Google+ helps index these images on the Google search. Google+ also still to this day has a great community of photographers, a really engaged community of friendly people. So I've been able to upload my work, comment on other people's work, and blog on this really great platform of amazing people. And I've been able to create and curate some really good stories that work in Google search. But above that, through Google+, I've been able to make contacts in different parts of the world. I've been able to make friends, people I can call up or email if I'm in different cities that I can go and shoot with. So that was a really great key for me to initially get my work out there. Soon after, Facebook followed up with having a subscription-based climate. So before it was all friends, but then they started to add followers, they started to make more robust business pages, and some photographers took it to where they made a business page, and some of them, like me, kept everything on a personal page. It's hard for me to say what's more important on Facebook, whether you want to keep things personal and whether you want to keep things as a business page. For me, I like having a personal page with high engagement because I feel there's less barrier between me and my audience. So people feel like they're talking just to me. They're not talking to a page called Photography where I occasionally comment. But here's the really important distinction between creating a Facebook business page and creating a Facebook personal page. It's really how much time you want to put into it. So for me, making social media not just a part of how I wanted to get my work out there, my name out there, but to make it part of my lifestyle and part of my business, I wanted to post every day, and for years I would post on Facebook every day, Google Plus every day, Twitter multiple times a day, and Instagram every day as well. I've started to taper that off a little bit because I have gained some success and traction on social media, but in the beginning it's going to be important for you to put out content. So whether that's on a business page format or that's on a personal page format, Google Plus and Facebook, it's going to be important to do regular content that's both engaging visually and engaging in a story fashion. So you're going to have to figure out a way to sort of pull people into your work. It's not just a pretty picture that they're seeing a story. You're giving them some intrigue, giving them something to follow, giving them something to share, or something to comment on. A lot of my favorite photographers on Facebook will share beautiful images of their portfolio, and they'll also share really inspiring words, quotes, different things that people would share organically anyway, combined with those images, and then you'll see somebody maybe at their office, they're at their office today and they're not feeling great about their job, but then they see this beautiful image, then these really nice words, so they share it, and then your work starts to get out there. And then after that, other networks start to pick it up. They say beautiful photo from this, beautiful words from that, and it becomes sort of, in small senses, viral for a certain amount of time. So social media isn't for everybody, and you don't have to go the route that I did. You don't have to have social media on every network. But I do urge you, whatever you choose, if you choose Facebook or Google+, Facebook Business or Personal, be ready to put the time in. And that time really is about consistent posts and a consistent message. Because this, again, is not just going to be your outward face. I think about a website kind of being somewhere where people can always find your work. They know they can go to your website, they know they can find your work. But if they visit you on Facebook, they expect to be able to interact with you. On Twitter, they want to be able to tweet directly to you and interact with you. So in Facebook, it's just as important to post consistent content as it is to engage with the people that are engaging your content. So you can't just post something, forget about it, and let a few people comment, because if you don't reply to those comments, it's likely that they won't continue to comment. In a similar fashion, you have to go to their work, to their pages, and engage, to like, comment, reshare. You have to basically put yourself part of these communities. And you can't just think of social media as an outpost to sort of blog or send your message out. You have to think about it as a community, and you have to nurture a community, just like you do in any other community you do in real life. And it's funny to call it real life and social media, but it's true. You can't just talk about yourself when you're out with your friends, just talk about yourself and not engage them as well in a conversation. You have to think about social media as a conversation too. The longer you can keep a post or that conversation going, the more potential it has to travel to new audiences. But here's where it gets really great. You are building real-life contacts. So having a large, heavily followed profile on social media, even a modest profile on social media, opens the doors to be able to communicate with different companies, different organizations, and different people all over the world. Social media in the beginning, even in 2012, helped me make connections in different parts of the world. People in Singapore, for example, reached out to me and asked me if I'd come and do a workshop, just because they had seen my photos on Facebook and Google+. And that sort of spawned a series of trips to Singapore, both for business, for photography, and different types of just pleasurable trips to Singapore. So a lot of the people that I've met, and some of my best friends to this day, I've met through social media and through making those connections by just engaging with the community. So that's very important. You can't just think of it as a platform that's not real life, where you're just talking and interacting with a fake community. These are real people that could become real contacts. You never know who's going to see your images. You never know who's going to comment on those images. They could be the heads of marketing departments at different companies. They could run different photography companies themselves. They could work for tourism boards. The more you can get your work out there and the more you can be approachable, the more people feel like this is somebody that I can actually talk to. A person, somebody that's very personable and nice. This is going to open up a lot of doors for you, and it's going to give you the ability to create a whole collection of new contacts that you would not be able to do in your local community alone. Other social media that's very important, Twitter is very important. It's very easy if you're writing blog posts, if you find interesting content that you're curating, it's really easy to share things that you care about, share the content that you're already sharing on different platforms, and engage on people on a one-on-one level. Twitter is a really fun thing to do. If you post something to 500px, you can tweet, I've just posted this new image of Singapore to 500px, and then people will engage that page. Or you can reshare somebody's image that you really like or some article. So it's a fun sort of news, headline-driven thing. So think of Facebook as a community where you can have a long post or an image, and Google Plus is like a blog roll. But you think of Twitter, Twitter is sort of a headline. So instead of writing 3 or 4 paragraphs about the image you captured here, you write one line, you write one sentence about this beautiful capture of this place during sunset to try to engage people with the words in the image, but in a small context of sort of a wow sentence. And then that stuff will start to get sort of engaged and reshared. And the best thing about travel and landscape photographs is a lot of social media companies have caught on to the fact that images cause things to go viral. And that's not just a regular image, but even on a post, you'll see a header image always has something intriguing. So if you're putting up nice content with a nice message, it'll go viral on Twitter as well. So don't forget about Twitter. And then today, a very important network is also Instagram. Oh, Instagram is great. So that's another one that I love getting on. And Instagram, the best thing about Instagram is it's photo first. The first thing you see on Instagram is always that photo. And there may or may not be a good description. It could be your 3-paragraph description, or it can just be that 1-sentence headline description. But the engagement on Instagram is instantaneous. So it's definitely probably my favorite photo sharing platform, and it's also the one that I find myself updating the most. In the beginning, just keep in mind these social media sites are all going to feel kind of similar. You're going to have one story, one image, and then you're kind of going to post it the same way on each place. But after a while, you'll get used to these social media platforms all differing, and we like to call them ecosystems. And once you start to learn them, you'll figure out that you have this story, you have this image, and after a while, just this comes with time and experience. You'll figure out how to put that information onto the different networks to make it more digestible in each ecosystem. That's not something that you can learn right away. That's just something you have to learn over time. One of the biggest goals for building social media is follower count. Obviously, a heavy follower count speaks volumes about your social media, but in this day and age, we can buy followers. So that doesn't really mean anything if you don't have engagement. So what I tell people is better to build things up slow. Please don't buy followers. Don't be part of that system. But what you want to do is you want to have engagement. So if I have 10,000 followers and really high ratio of engagement, a company is going to see that engagement as actually what they want. If I have 1 million followers and I have the same engagement of somebody who has 10,000, they're going to be able to see that I've either purchased followers, or even worst case scenario, nobody cares about the stuff that I'm posting. And to a company, that's detrimental. They want people who have a ratio of both high follower count and high engagement. The best way to do that is to build it up over time. If you get put on lists, you get spikes of followers, but what can happen, this danger will occur that you'll have so many followers and so little interaction that it'll make it seem like you're not posting anything interesting that's engaging your audience. Bottom line is a high follower count will give you leverage if you're trying to work with different companies on social media projects or shooting projects where you're sharing the images that you're capturing. But saying that, interaction and engagement is the most important thing for sustainable business. So yeah, having that big follower count might get you a few projects right off the bat, but if you can't keep your audience engaged and interested, then you're going to fail in the long term in social media. To wrap things up here with the social media section, I just can't stress enough that this is going to be your personality, and you have to stay consistent, and you have to stay very honest to your following. So once things start to become a situation where you could potentially monetize your social media, you can't just sell to your audience. So please keep that in mind. If you've been posting a lot of inspirational stuff, and then all of a sudden you say, buy this product for this company and use a bunch of hashtags, it's going to look disingenuous, and that's going to come across as dishonest. So it's a constant sort of give and take. You want to give your audience something that they want to consume, engage them in an inspirational way without trying to overmarket or oversell something on your social media. So it's a big danger. So as you start taking on these projects with companies, just bear that in mind. A lot of things that you can do on that corporate level can damage your social media. And if it takes you years to build social media to the point where you're really proud of it, it can just take a few short days of bad posts, of over-salesy posts to destroy it and have people kind of lose respect for you. So it's a big ecosystem, but the best thing you can do is just be honest with everybody. Be yourself. Bottom line with everything here is to keep consistent throughout social media and your web presence. So you want to make sure that if you're going to play the long game and you really want to make this last, if you want to build an engaged following, then you have to stay consistent and honest with that following. Now that we've talked a little bit about social media, about getting your work out there and how to conduct yourself both on social media and how to have a web presence, let's talk a little bit about the business side. How do I get started in the business of landscape and travel photography? If you're ready to get started as a travel photographer, it's likely that you're going to have to build up a portfolio of work before people are going to start hiring you and paying your expenses to be on the road. So the first thing you have to do is you have to find a way to travel, but you have to find a way to put the money together to be able to do so. And that travel that you take can't be considered a traditional vacation. You're not there just to sit on the beach and have cocktails, you're there to work. You're there to get the photos that you need for your portfolio. And most people think that they need a lot of money to travel, but what they fail to realize is they just haven't applied money that they have in their life already and reorganized it in a travel-centric way. So here's an example. When I was getting started, we didn't have a lot of money, but what I started to do was to cut out any expense that I could. And the things that I could cut out and that I can control is I can cook my own food instead of going out to eat. So if I limit going out to eat a few times a week or a few times a month, if I don't buy Starbucks coffee twice a week and I just brew it by myself, if I save money on groceries and start to eat cheaply and not buy all those expensive things, suddenly that frees up income. And that income to me was kind of like disposable income. It wasn't important to me to go out to the restaurant. I could save $30 a week or $60 a week, which turns into hundreds of dollars a month, which turns into thousands of dollars a year. Just by making simple edits to your own life and where you're placing your expenses and what's important, you can literally save or have an extra few $1,000s a year. A few $1,000s a year is enough to take budget travel. So in the beginning, you can't just go to a bunch of exotic locations unless you're willing to max out your credit card. I don't suggest doing that, but I do suggest saving money everywhere you can. So if you do eat out 6 times a month and you spend $40 each time, that adds up to a few $100s. After a couple months, you can afford a new camera, you can afford a new lens. After a few more months, you can afford a plane ticket. After a few more months, you can afford to stay somewhere in a nice location for a week. That's just eating out to dinner. I'm sure there's countless things in your life that you can reapply that money. And if you think about it, you can just take what you already own and save and be frugal. So we were frugal to the point of ridiculousness. We would eat peanut butter and jelly. We would do everything that we can to save as many dollars as we could to stockpile enough money to be able to take these trips. The initial trips to build the portfolio were out of pocket. But here was the key. I didn't care if I got work from it. It was something that I wanted to do. My main goal was to build an incredible portfolio of images that I could then use to market myself. I didn't want to do that on credit cards. I knew that racking up an extreme amount of debt would be the wrong idea, so we just saved as much money as we could. And when we were on the road, when we decided to go to places, we'd do the same thing. We'd rent apartments on Airbnb so that we could cook our own food. We'd eat very simply. I'd eat bread and peanut butter and jelly in places. The first time we ever went to Iceland, we rented just a simple 4-door car. It was like a Volkswagen, bottom-of-the-line car. We drove around Iceland for about 2 weeks and slept in the car. First time we went to Ireland, went to Dublin, went to a Salvation Army store and bought blankets and different things like that. Drove around Ireland for 2 weeks, stayed in campgrounds and slept in the car. We couldn't afford to get a tent. We didn't take a tent with us. We just did that, bought simple foods at the gas stations, grocery stores, and never ate out a single time. Travel with a little coffee maker, make our own coffee, and save money everywhere we can. So it's a mistake to think that travel needs to be expensive, because it doesn't. Once you cover the cost of the flight, your cost in the country is basically determined by the type of lifestyle that you want to live. So sure, if you're taking this exotic vacation somewhere and you want to stay in a spa and you want to go to the pool and you want to go eat out, then probably this kind of travel photography lifestyle isn't going to be for you. But if you're also in a situation where you have a bunch of money and you can do that, then go for it. Stay in the spa, get the photos and everything. But if you're like me and like most of us, it's going to take just small edits to your life and to your finances to determine where you can pull that money, and you have to basically then decide if you can pull this money, if it's a priority for you to use it for travel. Once we started cutting finances or simplifying our life as far as what we ate, what we consumed, what we did, our free time, going out to movies as opposed to watching them at home, we then decided to go take it a step further and we stopped having cable. We bought the simplest internet plan. We condensed our cell phone plan. We started to cut money everywhere that we could. As we started to get further along into it, we noticed that we needed more gear. I needed better lenses. I needed a more stable tripod. We had 2 cars at the time. We sold 1 car, and all the money we made from that car went into buying the bags that we needed, buying the gear that we needed, buying a new tripod so that we could continue to get the better shots that we wanted. I was also lucky to travel with my wife, and together we were able to sort of condense our lifestyle down. So it wasn't just me, and I knew that I didn't want to go alone. We wanted to do this together. So both of us worked very well together to be able to just keep things as light and cheap as possible. And every extra penny that we saved went towards travel and went towards creating this body of work. Talking about doing all these things to your life and simplifying things down to a point where you can make travel a priority is definitely one thing, but you'll find, and I find, that a lot of people talk about wanting to do this, wanting to be able to simplify their lives, wanting to be able to travel and become a travel photographer and make that a priority. But the fact is, a lot of people aren't willing to give up what makes them comfortable. So for a lot of people, eating out makes them comfortable, having nice clothes, having nice things, having a home, all these things. They become so comfortable that they're not willing to get rid of them. So this type of lifestyle, and for us in particular, required a lot of sacrifice. In the beginning, we shifted these priorities so that we could make travel the #1 top priority, and I really did want to become a professional travel photographer, so that was the main goal. But underneath all that, it was more important to me to have these life experiences, to be able to travel, to be able to create a really great portfolio of images, because I knew that that was going to be the most important thing. And if I could create a portfolio of images that I was proud of, I knew that I'd later be able to market that into something that I wanted to sell, or to be able to work with different companies. But in the beginning, the travel was more about inspiration. So we were inspired to simplify our lives. We were inspired to let go of things that made us comfortable so that we could transform our lives into lives that could be enriched with different types of travel. And while we were in these locations, I aggressively shot every day, morning to night, to get as many images as possible. So friends and family, they were like, wow, it must be nice to take vacations all the time. And I didn't really have anything to say that. It's like, I'm not on vacation. I might be in Greece, but I'm working. I'm trying to build a portfolio. It's hard work. We're doing a lot of research on the locations, on the vantage points and everything, and trying to make the few days that we can afford to stay there matter as much as possible. So in other words, just use what little time we can afford to get the best images we can. I know not everybody's going to be able to transform their lives as much, or you might have kids, you might have different things that are going to keep you or prevent you from traveling really far at first. And that's why I suggested traveling close to home. Make it a family trip around the Midwest or the west of the United States, where you can start building a landscape photography portfolio and then start working from there. Now, one thing that's really important to understand is it's not a race, because a race is just going to get you quantity, it's quality. If you shoot great images, they will stand up and they will stand the test of time. I've spent years building my portfolio to get it to where it is today, and I did that very patiently with whatever resources I had available. A big consideration when you're getting started is where you actually travel to. And on a budget, certain parts of the world are much more expensive than other parts of the world. So think about places, big cities. Think about just going to New York City or to London or to Stockholm or Oslo. The cost, not only to stay when you rent somewhere, but the food is astronomical compared to the US dollar and the normal United States. So these places, starting out, you're probably going to have way less time on a budget. But if you go to other places, if you go to Central or South America or Southeast Asia, the living costs are a fraction. So if you go to Cambodia or you go to Thailand, you may be able to get a guest house for $30 or $40 a night, and then your food costs are only a few dollars a day. Where in London, it would be 5 times that. So what you can start to do, if you think about the biggest costs and the investments in this in the beginning, are one, it's going to be a plane ticket if you live in the United States. It's always expensive to get to Europe or Asia. But once you're there, travel can be pretty cheap. So we'll start with Asia. If you think about starting out in Cambodia, exploring the areas, then you can fly to the different countries or take a bus. There aren't as many trains there, but you can easily get transportation with cheap flights and buses to the different countries, and you can really stretch your dollar. So if you're able to save a good amount of money, or even a modest amount of money, in Southeast Asia you'll be able to travel to all the surrounding countries and cities on a very tight budget and actually have a pretty good lifestyle while you're there. In Europe it's going to be, I'd just say, a little bit more difficult because it is a normal priced country, and some of the cities are going to be more expensive, some are going to be more affordable. So there you're really going to have to employ some techniques of staying in apartments so you can minimize eating out, which can be very expensive, take trains, take buses, use local public transportation rather than taxis. If you just take the metro or the train, you're going to save lots of money when you're traveling. When you're booking places, like if you're booking Rome or Paris, don't stay inside of city center because that's going to be hundreds of dollars a night. If you stay just outside city center, stay close to a metro station or a train station or bus stop, and you're going to save quite a bit of money, and then you can just take the bus in. You'll have to leave a little bit earlier, but you're going to save a ton of cash. When you're inside of Europe, you can take trains everywhere. So it's all about finding places that are affordable to stay and maximizing your time. So if you are working at a job right now where you can't break away for more than a couple weeks out of the year, you need to plan those 2 weeks. And if you're just doing 1 2-week vacation or 2-week vacation, 2 2-week vacations per year, you're going to be able to save the money using some of those methods. However you can save money, you're going to be able to afford these trips. And while you're going to afford these trips, then it's about maximizing the potential when you're there. So start out, when you want to really build a diversified portfolio, start in some of the more affordable places in the world, because you're going to be able to spend more time in those locations as opposed to the more expensive locations. We were spending an extraordinary amount of time on the road and also spending a lot of money on round-trip tickets. And with that round-trip ticket, coming back to Florida, we were also noticing that we were still maintaining our lifestyle in Florida. Even though we simplified it down to the bare essentials, we were still paying for our apartment, we still had car insurance, we still had cell phone bills, we still had all these expenses. And that would prevent us from being able to spend too much time in these locations because it was all about what we had saved or what we had budgeted. And sometimes that was only for a few days or sometimes that was a week. So that became very difficult. So for us, we started to decide that, why are we keeping these expenses at home? Why don't we just sell everything and start traveling full time? So since March of 2012, my wife and I have been 100% location independent. We basically sold everything that we owned or canceled any payments, simplified everything down, put everything into a 5-foot by 5-foot AC storage unit that we couldn't get rid of, and we've been traveling with one-way tickets ever since. So we took that same amount of money that we were investing in maintaining a lifestyle inside the United States, and now we are transferring that directly into maintaining a mobile lifestyle. So we're already able to afford a really modest mobile lifestyle with a small apartment in the United States, but now taking all that money together and focusing it 100% on travel has given me the ability to now travel longer in these destinations. Obviously, selling all your possessions and being on the road full time isn't for everybody. If you can do it, that's great, and there are many steps you can take to keep simplifying, getting rid of everything, and really just taking that plunge and living on the road full time. But if you can't do that, there's no reason why you can't take multiple trips per year. And there are some things that you can do. You just need to keep simplifying those costs. So if you're living in a nice 2 or 3 bedroom apartment and it's just you and your significant other, then maybe you could rent a smaller place that's cheaper. That's a 1-bedroom place. If you're not going to be home that much, does it really matter if you're in the best location with the best view? You can simplify things that way. You could probably use Airbnb, so while you're gone, you can have somebody stay in your apartment so you can recoup some of that cash. There are tons of ways to make up the extra money to be able to travel, but it's going to take some cleverness and creativity on your part to make sure that they can happen. This all leads into the question, how do I make a living as a professional travel photographer? The answer to that question, I wish it was an easy question, but photography changes all the time. Quite a few years ago, we didn't even have photography and social media. Photography wasn't very viable on social media to be able to build an audience. We're living in a time where things change so rapidly. The climate and business changes so rapidly that we have to stay on top of all these changing trends. So if you think about photography traditionally, and in the past, it's had a lot to do with the actual photography. So you'd take photos, you'd sell photos, whether that's in print or you'd license photos. You might work with Getty, Corbis, or Alamy, or one of the big stock companies, and you might make a pretty decent living on it. Well, those times have changed so much because of the advent of micro stock and different sites. Right now, you can get on 500px, you can license your images through Getty on Flickr, but you're not making a lot of money. It's a small percentage split, and even the large percentage splits are not that significant in the income based on the price that they sell and license, whether it's royalty-free or rights managed. That is a very difficult business to succeed in. Same thing with the print market. There are a few landscape photographers out there who are making a lot of money with prints, but again, that fall off is very fast. So while there's a few people at the top, there's not a lot of money to be made. It's not that I'm saying that there's no money to be made. I'm just saying that it probably sounds funny for me to tell you that even though I'm a professional landscape and travel photographer, I make the minimum portion of my income from selling my actual photography. If you invest the time in yourself, if you invest the time in building a profile on social media, on the web, in only sharing your best images and building the best portfolio possible, if you spent time to keyword, make sure that the metadata is correct so that everything is indexed and searched, you can assure that you're putting the best work you could possibly create out into the world and out into the internet, then eventually, after a series of months and sometimes years, you're going to create this net of areas and images and stories that people are going to find and they're going to notice. And that's going to start to attract businesses and people towards you that are going to offer to hopefully pay you or want to buy an image or want a print of an image or want to license it for a magazine or a billboard cover or different things like that. But the first thing you have to do is establish that net. You have to cast it wide to be able to pull in these types of people and these potential clients. And what's interesting though is when I started doing this, I kind of thought this was the business that I'm going to be able to attract. But every 6 months, I'm amazed at the different possibilities that come in that I had no idea would even happen. Just other opportunities that I never even thought of, because it's not me always pushing myself at different companies and pitching things at different companies. Often now, it's people coming to me with ideas and different things that I wouldn't have even thought of myself. Something that I also noticed very quickly was the potential to work with different tourism boards. And you can always reach out to local tourism boards and ask them for assistance, maybe in exchange for blogging or exchange for some of the images that you capture. A lot of great tourism boards all over the world will help host maybe some of your accommodations or at least get you discounts or give you advice on some of the places to shoot. Or at the very least, they'll reshare some of the images that you capture and help spread it throughout their audiences. So I've worked with a couple great companies and a couple great tourism boards, but my favorite one most recently was Queensland, Australia, and they reached out to me directly because of the images they saw on my Google Plus profile. One of the people that worked in their office was actually a fan of my work and requested me specifically for part of this project where they took about 30 different bloggers and Instagrammers and photographers and sent them to different parts of Queensland to highlight and share these regions. So what happens in tourism is tourism to certain areas becomes very polarized. So if you think about Australia, you think about Sydney, Australia, whether you've been or you haven't been, things are sort of popping into your head, the Harbour Bridge, the Opera House, these very iconic things in Sydney. But did you know some of the coastline of Sydney and Northern Sydney is some of the most stunning coastline for photography in the world? There's all these little places around that they're trying to divert tourism into because there's so many other beautiful places in sustainable business. Tourism board's job is to work with all of these people coming in, manage the tourism and start to diversify it. So they specifically wanted me to target some of the regions where nobody's really gotten many photos from, because they looked at my portfolio and they saw some of the work that I was doing and they trusted me to go to these places where maybe they couldn't trust another type of photographer or just a regular Instagrammer to go. They really wanted a landscape photographer to explore, to hike into these canyons and to find these places in the outback they could use. And recently, actually, they came back to me, now this is months later, they actually bought 5 or 6 of those images that I shot. So they already brought me out there, they paid all of our expenses, they flew me in helicopters to different islands, over different ridges to help get all these photos. Didn't ask for any of the rights or licensing for them, just wanted me to share on social media using the hashtags. They give me a media kit telling me what I should share, who I should mention, who's responsible for funding the project. And in that turn, I get to keep all these images to promote myself and promote myself in my portfolio. And then they've also gone on to actually purchase some of these so they can use it in the advertising for those regions in the world. So there's a lot of places that sometimes reach out. And if you talk to, this transcends industry. It's not just in the travel photography, but it's also the travel blogging industry. So there are a lot of travel blogs out there where people do this full time. They actually get free trips from different parts of the world, different tourism boards, and they travel to all these places just to blog about it. In exchange for blogging, they get lodging in some of these places. Well, sometimes, you know, when these places start to reach out to you, you'll have ridiculous offers, like they'll pay for 1 day and they'll fly you out and they expect all of this stuff. But some of them are really good. They'll keep you for a week or 2 weeks, show you the best parts of the country, and some of them are paid, some of them aren't paid. But for us, it's kind of a unique situation where we don't have a house, we don't have a mortgage, so anytime our living expenses can be covered or comped, we actually are able to create a surplus of funds. So it works out pretty well whether it's paid or unpaid. But I'm very selective these days on the ones that I work with. I want to make sure that it's a region I want to go to. And in that case, you have to negotiate, what the give and the take is for what services I'm going to provide, however many images, how much sharing on social media, what they're in turn able to provide and what they're expecting from you. Because sometimes a free trip can cost you more in the long run in your time than if you would have paid out of pocket. Another thing that's happened is through my presence on social media and throughout the world, a lot of the companies who make the products that I use on a daily basis have reached out to me and offered me sponsorship, have offered me support, and in turn, through those sponsorships, whether they're paid or unpaid, they also fly me to different parts of the world to either capture images with prototype equipment or current equipment, or they want me to speak at different events and conferences. So that's also created another sustainable income base for me. I'm very selective with the companies that I work with. I don't just take offers from any company who wants to send me free gear. One, I don't think that that's really good business ethic. I think it's very dishonest. And two, I don't have anywhere to put it. I'm location independent. So if they send it to me and I don't use it, I'm not going to travel with it. But some of my favorite companies, I've been able to establish really good working relationships. And now, whether it's them pitching to me or me pitching to them, I'm able to work on some pretty cool projects all over the world with their support. A big part of what I do also has to do with my background of education and now teaching workshops, whether they're just photography workshops or post-processing workshops worldwide. And if you're watching this, you've already purchased the tutorial where I'm about to teach you photography on location and in post-processing. So I do this all over the world. I do this for official conferences, different companies, different events, but I also put on my own workshops called Moments in Time in different parts of the world too. So basically everything, this all boils down to my success was greatly to do with social media and really marketing myself, telling very honest stories online, blogging, reviewing and things like that and getting my name out there. But the main way that I was able to become successful in photography was about diversifying my revenues of income. So I wasn't just trying to do licensing. So licensing helps. I don't do a lot of licensing, but companies do contact me. They want to license my images, but I don't count on that as my source of income. Same thing with prints. I occasionally do prints. Prints is something that I want to get into more, so I can't really tell you guys what the best avenue to do in that regard is because it's something I personally haven't set up yet, but I think if you treat it as a casual income, it could be very beneficial. But my success has really been based on diversifying, is taking on teaching projects, speaking projects, different types of sponsorships, ambassadorships, different tourism initiatives, different social media projects, different product development or consulting kind of things. Everything is photography, but it's related to the photography industry and now the travel industry. So I've been able to kind of make a lot of contacts and build these really cool projects out of a concept. So I'm not using any working model. I'm just trying to observe the trends that I've found in the industry and social media and just the contacts of people that I know to start building new opportunities for myself. And I really think that's the key in photography today, is to not become stagnant. It's like, yes, you have to shoot, yes, you have to have a style, yes, you have to market yourself, but you always have to look for the next opportunity. Because 2 years down the line, it's no longer going to be sustainable or easy to get into. So the key is really observing the trends and figuring out where you can carve your own niche in the photography industry. Because we're having this conversation today means that you've purchased this tutorial about cityscape and astrophotography, and maybe you even have purchased the tutorial for landscape photography and post-processing. And that means that it's a genre that you love. And truth be told, this is not a genre of photography where you can make a really easy, quick, sustainable income. And what I mean by that is if you picked up a camera and wanted to become a wedding photographer, there are steps you can take to start shooting weddings today. Shooting events. If you're a portrait photographer, you can start working on the studio portfolio stuff. You're working with real clients, real projects. You can advertise yourself as this type of photography. If you're choosing this path of landscape and travel photography, it's a much harder road to go down. It takes a long time to build a business. And what you have to remember is it's something that you have to be passionate about. It's something that you have to love, whether or not success comes. Getting into photography, I had no idea that I'd be sitting on this couch talking to you guys today. A year ago, I had no idea I'd be sitting on this couch talking to you guys today. It's just that I've taken a lot of chances and I've observed the trends and I've tried to figure out what the next thing is going to be. And I'm a firm believer that if you do hard work, if you do great work, and you get your name out there and you build a foundation for your business of integrity and high quality, then the work will find you, because you're only as strong as your reputation. So as long as you work hard at it, as long as you love what you're doing and people can read that passion, I firmly believe you'll be successful.